Good afternoon. Welcome to Teams Talks. I'm David Powers. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm always excited about a new edition of Teams Talks, but today I'm a little extra pumped because we have a very hot topic for the students that we serve here in the Career Development Center. This afternoon, I'm joined by Carrie Nguyen and the managing immigration attorney, and Denise Rosales, associate attorney with our Mavs Edge partner, the law office of Carrie Nguyen, and we're going to discuss sponsorship and questions, those hot questions we have from our international student population. And coming to UTA, before coming to UTA, I'd never worked with international students before. It's been quite an education for me working with those students, and as I said, really excited to have you guys joining us today with your level of expertise. Would you please start by introducing yourselves?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, David. Denise and I both are very excited for this opportunity. We're a big supporter of UTA. We're your neighbor, and we have had a lot of interns from UTA as well. So we're very excited for this opportunity. My name is Carrie Nguyen. Like David mentioned, I'm the managing attorney. We are the law office of Carrie Nguyen. I founded the law firm back in 2014. So we're coming up on our 10 years anniversary this year. I have Ms. Denise Rosales, who is our associate attorney, and she's going to introduce herself in a little bit. But we are an immigration firm here in Arlington, Texas, and we do nothing but immigration. I've been practicing I've been probably close to 15 years now, and it's what I love to do, and it's all I know how to do. So I'm excited to kind of share some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today with the students.
Yeah, my name is Denise Rosales. I am a UTA alum, and I am an associate attorney here at the law office of Carrie Nguyen, where we do solely immigration. It's my background. I was previously a nonprofit prior to this, and I also just love immigration law, going on my 5th year of doing it.
Yes, thanks again for being here. Like I said, we're excited to get started with the presentation. But before we get that rolling, I just want to remind the students who are joining us that we have contact information, handshake information, direct links to the website, all in the comments section. So please take advantage of connecting with our guests today and exploring the website. As we've mentioned once already, I know, and probably will mention several times, the law office is a Mavs Edge partner, meaning that they will be offering internships to UTA students or providing opportunities for internships to UTA students, and those will be posted in Handshake. So again, you can explore all of that in the comments section. And Carrie, I don't want to take up any more time. Please, I'd love to hear the presentation.
Yeah, and then also just along with that, I want to kind of share something fun and exciting. We will be offering a free consultation to any live participants right now. Denise is going to share the code at the end. And so if you have any questions for us at the end of the presentation that maybe we weren't able to address, or maybe they're specific to your case, you can just call office, give them the code, and then you'll be eligible for a free consultation. So we just want to support UTA students as much as possible. So with that in mind, I will go on to our presentation. So, and Dave, I just want to assure you guys can see the screen okay, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So in case if you didn't see what we look like, this is who we are. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we are a boutique immigration law firm. I founded this 10 years ago. We probably combined more than 15 years now. I've been practicing since 2009. One thing I'm very proud of is that we are a team of all-women team. I myself, as an immigrant, I came here when I was 10 years old, and all of us on the team are either immigrants or children of immigrants. So this is something that is deeply, close to our hearts, and we're very passionate about. And we are literally 5 minutes away from UTA campus. So hopefully one of these days you could come and visit where we are and be our intern or just have questions about immigration law. And I wanted to share something with you guys. This is what I mean by we are very big support of UTA, especially the students, that we have hosted UTA interns in the past. For example, you have Nicole here. She was a communication major with a minor in legal studies. She interned with me as a marketing intern back in 2021. She won a scholarship. We had a scholarship for first generation college student, and she was one of the recipients. And then she joined our team, I think it was actually in 2022, as a team coordinator, and then transitioned into an outreach coordinator. So we love UTA students. And then I want to kind of bring attention to, we do have a summer legal assistant internship that's available. If you are interested, please send over your resume and a cover letter to that email, admin@carylegal.com. And so we kind of have a preference for UTA students because we are right by next door and we just a big support of UTA. So if you are interested, please send your resume. It's for anyone who's interested in maybe thinking about law school or know for sure they want to go to law school. And I always tell everybody that, you know, the best way to know whether you should go to law school and be an attorney is to have an internship or work at a law school or at a law firm first. So you can get that exposure. That's extremely important. What do you think about that, Denise?
I agree 100%. I did internship as an undergrad student while I was at UTA as well at a law firm, and it was really a pivotal experience for me in kind of cementing that desire to go to law school and to do immigration law. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also if you have a passion in marketing, marketing is not my area of expertise. I'm an immigration attorney. They did not teach us anything about marketing or social media growing up. So I'm always intrigued by what, you know, the young generation knows about marketing and social media. So if that's something that you're interested as well, we also have a marketing internship as well. So just a little bit about what we do and how we partner with UTA. But I'm sure most of you guys are here because you are interested in learning about kind of like work visa, sponsorship by the employer. And so I will be addressing some of those questions. And then Denise will cover other alternatives, kind of family-based options at the end of the presentation. If, like I say, if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer general questions. If you have specific questions regarding your case, I think that's probably best to just reach out to us with the consultation request, and we'd be glad to meet with you and discuss your case one-on-one. But going right into H-1B. So there is no perfect time then right now to talk about H-1B. And the reason for that is there's very specific timeline for you guys to fill out or to start the process for H-1B, and it actually starts March 1st. And I'm going to go into specific timeline with that, just so I can kind of get an idea of who is participating online right now. If you guys don't mind, just put it in the chat, kind of like what grade or what, you know, whether you're freshman, sophomore, junior, senior in the chat. And so that way I have an idea of who I can kind of tailor the discussion about. I mean, it's going to be general, but if I know that all of you guys are graduating in May, then I could kind of dive into those specific better. So let me go to the chat. I may need Julie help on this, but if you guys are just able to put in the chat what class you are in currently. Dave, are you able to see the chat or?
Yeah, I'm viewing. I haven't seen anything pop up just yet.
If you just want to flag it for me, because I'm on the presentation view, so it's kind of hard for me to see the chat. Mm-hmm. So feel free to interrupt me, but I'm going to just kind of jump in.
Sure.
So H-1B for immigration attorneys, we kind of refer that to as a default visa for professionals. What I mean by that is that's kind of like the go-to visa when somebody's coming in asking for a work visa. It is a visa based on a specialty occupation. So it's not just for everybody, but it's a wide range of field. It's pretty, I mean, I could say you could pure like engineering, anyone in IT, medical. I mean, it's a wide range, but the very specific thing that you all need to have is a bachelor degree in that specific field or work experience. So how the equivalent work experience is generally 3 years of experience equal to 1 year of education. And so if you don't have a bachelor degree, which probably not applicable for the audience today, most of you guys are going to be graduating with a bachelor degree. So you should be meeting this requirement, okay? If you do get the H-1B visa, it is valid for 3 years, and it could be extended for up to 6 years. And I could go in more detail of that in a little bit. It does potentially lead to a green card, which is what we refer to as permanent residency, and you start that at your 5th year. So it is a visa that is excellent if you are thinking about, hey, once I'm done with my studies, I want to, stay here in the United States, work, and I also want to bring my family here to the United States. This visa does allow derivatives dependent. So if you are married, your spouse or your minor children will also get a work permit and ability to stay here and work lawfully in the United States as well, okay? What you will hear a lot is the prevailing wage. This is set by the Department of Labor, is required. So for any employer, for example, myself, let's say I wanted to hire a lawyer from Mexico, for example, I have to make sure that we meet the prevailing wage determinations. So for the DFW area, for a lawyer, what is the reasonable and kind of like pay scale that I have to offer? So that is very important for the Department of Labor to make sure that the offer that the employer made meets the prevailing wage determination as well. One of the things that everyone will ask about is, well, how many of these visas available? There is technically 85,000, but 65,000 visa is set aside for people with bachelor degree, and then 20,000 in addition is for anyone with advanced degree from a U.S. institution. So anyone with a master, above a bachelor would count into this. So if one of my tips that is, if you are interested in H-1B, it will be beneficial if you have a advanced degree, because it will kind of gives you that additional weight that will play in your favor. And if you are being offered a job by a university or a nonprofit entity, a research organization, let's say, for example, you are a biology major at UTA and you wanted to be a research, you want to work in the research lab, and UTA offer you a job, but then you don't have to, your H-1B visa is not capped by the 85,000 visa. So that's one good thing about working for a nonprofit, for a research or university. And where I'm going with this is what people mostly refer to as the H-1B lottery. And like I said earlier, this is the perfect time to do this because there's certain deadline. March 1st is the beginning of it. And before we kind of dive into this year, the reason you see last year is being referred to as 2024 is because the fiscal year for the government starts in October. So this is basically people that the number that you're seeing here and the timeline were of last year that got the lottery for 2024. And so just to kind of give you an example, basically in February, late February is when people start to sign up for the account online so they could start register online. March 1st, last year, the H-1B registration opened up at noon, and then it cuts off on March 20th. And so at the end of the latter half of March is when there's this random selection of basically the lottery, and they select a certain amount of number of people. I can tell you that last year there were 780,884. and there were only 188,400 that were selected. So you're looking at about a 24% chance of selection. However, if you have an advanced degree, statistically, it shows that you probably increase your chance of being selected about 20% in addition, so about 40% selection rate if you have an advanced degree. So another thing that to consider when you wanted to see if you want to pursue a higher degree than a bachelor. Once you are notified that you are selected, which is at the end of usually about March 31st, last year was March 27th, then the H-1B visa process actually opened up, okay, from April to June. And you have during that time to, and I guess one thing I could kind of say at the beginning, I forgot to mention, is obviously you have to have an employer who willing to petition for you. So again, this is sponsorship, right? So if you graduate and then maybe you interning with an employer and they love you and they say, hey, I really want to sponsor you, then this is a timeline that they need to be aware of when they need to register, to start the registration. And then if you were selected at the end of March, then they need to start the visa petition process for you in April, okay? And last year, there was actually a second run of the lottery because there weren't enough, they have the 85,000 and there weren't enough people. And so they run another second round of the lottery. So around August 2nd, people were getting notification, hey, you were selected for the H-1B lottery system. So which was great for a lot of people because they have given up hope. And then they found out in August that they actually won the second round of it because they just wanted, the immigration just want to make sure that they give away all the 85,000 that they had. So that's what happened last year. And the timeline really is the same for every year, just maybe a day or two off. David, did you have a question?
Yeah, I thought it might be a good time to ask this question while you're discussing sponsorship and what the employer's responsibility. We're always talking to students about the level of investment an employer is going to make in them in the sponsorship process. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit while we're at this point about what that looks like for an employer. And I think it's my understanding that in order to, I guess it's complete a registration that enters you into that lottery, is there a cost associated with employers to do that? Or is it once you win the lottery and they're actually, I guess, helping you with the actual sponsorship and visas, there's a cost associated with that? Could you talk a little bit about what it looks like from the employer's perspective? Because I think students don't understand the investment that an employer is making in them and why it's important to show that they're worth that, right, investment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great question. Let me see if I could run to the next slide because I think I did cover that part. I could come back to, yeah, so I'm going to jump ahead and then answer that question. And then basically there is, to create the online account, it's free, okay? So the employer will have to create an online USCIS account, the attorney if there is one, and then the actual applicant, okay? So if you're a student, you could create an online USCIS account. If you are going through this process right now, you should be doing that today if you haven't already. March 6th to March 22nd, there is an online registration. It's $10. Last year, they proposed it to go up to $250. Luckily, that didn't happen, so it's still a $10 fee. Going to David's questions, there's something that's really important to know is that the employer is responsible for paying for any and all of the fees, okay? So you're probably looking at, on average, there's a lot of fees in TEL, but you probably look, the employer is probably going to probably dedicate, I would say, about $3,000, okay, for the process. And that includes, just depending if they go with an attorney, and the attorney fees may vary, but generally, if an employer comes to us and asks us, you know, how much, like what's the minimum? We usually say about 3,000 to 5,000, just depending. There's also premium processing fee as well. And that's the only fee that the student can choose or the applicant can choose to pay on their own. But throughout this whole process, it's actually not allowed that the employee pay any part of this. Everything has to be paid by the employer. But that's kind of the range that the employer is, you know, probably need to budget for to make sure that they covering everything from beginning to end. Okay. And so did that answer your question?
It did. And just a quick follow-up to clarify for me, because I'm a bit confused sometimes with this process when we're talking to employers. So if an employer wants to hire you for a position, and they've gone through the steps to start to do that, but you don't hit the lottery or you don't come up, you're not selected, then at that point, the employer is not able to move forward in the process at all, correct? I mean, you have to be one of that 24% that you mentioned.
Yes, absolutely. And so the initial, just to like sign up for the lottery, that's a very minimal fee. I think most attorneys, if you end up working with an attorney, they may charge like $500. So really, you're probably losing out maybe $500 if you don't get selected.
Okay. That's awesome.
And then,
thank you.
and then once you're selected, then that's the rest of the other fees are coming in. And so, and I know again, kind of wide range. I think it just depending on, you know, if you work with a lawyer and if you want to pay premium processing fees and stuff like that.
That's really helpful. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, of course. And so going back to this slide, and this is like the perfect time that we're talking about H-1B right now, because March 6th at noon, the registration will open up for you to enter into the lottery, okay? And it will close on March 22nd. So, you know, so keep that in mind if you are working with an employer and they have already suggested, hey, we want to sponsor for you. This is a time to really, you know, it's not too late. You can still do it. So just definitely get this ball going. End of March, like I say, there will be a lottery system and it's all computerized. One thing that they are doing differently this year is they have reamped the selection process, because what happened in the past is an employer, the company, can only do one registration for that employee, okay? So it's not like you can't increase your chance and put like 10 registration for one employee. That is not allowed, and that will invalidate your registration and you get denied, okay? An employee, however, can be sponsored by multiple employer. So let's say I'm just trying out, you know, I don't know which company is going to be the best fit for me. I got, you know, 5 jobs laying up and they're all willing to sponsor me. Well, then I have 5 registration that's in the process, right? So if you look at this, just to kind of give you an idea, like last year, there were 758,000 or so of registration. 350 were people that only have one single registration. And then there were 408,000 that have more than multiple registration, right? So this year, to be fair for everybody, and they wanted to make sure that they eliminate any fraud, it's registered with your passport information. And so it's selected by per applicant. So even if you have 10 employers, it does not increase your chance of getting selected. So this is something that's one of their steps that they have implemented to make sure that they're just trying to be as fair as possible to everybody, okay? Once you've been notified, let me go back to my screen here. So this is what you will see if you were, once you submit it. So once you submit your registration, your online account will show that it's submitted, okay? And then if you were selected, you will be notified by the end of March that you were selected for the H-1B CAP petition. And you will not see this not selected until the end of the process, okay? And the reason for that is I mentioned to you that last year they had a second round of the lottery, right? So until this whole process and immigration meets their cap number, they're not going to notify you that you were not selected. So if you just, sorry, if you log in on March 31st and you were wondering if you were selected or not, you will only see submitted or selected only, okay? So you're not going to see the not selected until probably the end of the process. So, and then you may see a denied. This is when they will see that maybe multiple registration was submitted on your behalf, or if there was some incorrect information as well. So that's where, or if you failed to make the payment or something like that. So those are kind of the 4 things that you will see. There is no appeal process. If you were denied, invalidated, it's not like you could say, hey, you were wrong. It's one-time thing. So that is basically the lottery process. And one of the things that, to kind of touch base and answers David's question, is that the employer really does have a duty to make sure that they have done everything that's complete, true, and correct. So what I mean by that, it has to be a legitimate job offer, okay? The employer does sign off with the understanding that they could be penalized if they find out that the job offer wasn't legitimate, or if they were actually, because they do go to the job site and visit, okay? So the Department of Labor does do this. So if you sponsor, and let's say I sponsor Denise to work here, the Department of Labor comes, they do the job site visit randomly, and it shows Denise is nowhere to be found, okay? That's a big no-no, obviously. They just don't want, they want to make sure that, you know, if people applying for the H-1B visa, that is a legitimate job offer. And then also, like, if I say she's working as a lawyer, right? And if they come in and do the investigation and it turns out that she's actually working as my marketing manager, well, that's not correct either. Mm-hmm. So the employer has the job duty to make sure that what they're submitting is true and correct, because there will be a job site investigation randomly. Mm-hmm. And if they're selected, then on October 1st, this is assuming that this is your first H-1B visa, is when your start date is, okay? So you will be going through the process of applying for the visa, and then you know, it's a few, unless you pay for premium processing, you probably won't find out till late in June, July, that, you know, your visa has been approved. Your start date will be October 1st, okay? I mentioned this already, but obviously the most important thing is ensuring that correct information is provided. This is where it will lead to your registration being denied or being invalidated because of, you know, maybe passport, date of birth, names are not correct. And then I mentioned that the beneficiary-centric system has the new system where is making sure that each beneficiary has the same chance of being selected, regardless of how many numbers of registration. So this is something that they have started this year. You can still have multiple employers petitioning for you, but it is not going to increase your chance. And then let me make sure I cover. All right, and then here's just some tips for you guys to remind. And all right, so most importantly, this is the time to register. If you are a senior and you know that you're graduating in May, this is definitely where you really need to find an employer who's willing to sponsor you, okay, and start doing this process. So from the employer perspective, this is kind of what the employer is going to be looking at. They're going to identify employees who may be a good H-1B visa employee. They're going to look at maybe interns that are working with them right now to see if they could either file for an extension on the OPT or if they need to go ahead and file for an H-1B visa. Again, I'm going to emphasize on the job description. The Department of Labor, there's 2 systems that attorneys kind of use to see if the job offer, the job description, the job title, it's all going to be valid with the Department of Labor. We look at the Occupational Outlook Handbook. There's the ONET system. There's a prevailing wage determination. So those are all the things that the employer and their lawyer have to work to make sure that if I'm sponsoring Denise to be an attorney, okay, do we have the prevailing wage determination met? Does her degree, okay, actually is what she's going to be using for the job, right? Does the job description match everything? Because just because you were selected for the lottery, it does not mean that you automatically get the H-1B visa. You still have to meet all these requirements. So the most important thing is looking at the job description. You have to examine the employee's educational and work history. So it kind of goes back to, you know, okay, their diploma, if they don't have a diploma, do they have the sufficient work experience to replace that? Also, if you have an education that is in a foreign country, they would have to get to an accredited company to make sure that that is the equivalent of the US degree. And then sometimes for certain, like for example, for nursing, for example, you may have to have some specific state license. So that's another consideration too. Does this person have the specific license to work here, you know, even as a teacher, as whatever it is? So those are all the things that the employer really need to get going and working with their attorney and making sure that they have all the requirements to submit for the H-1B visa, okay? Another important consideration, and this is where I really encourage all the students or whoever is listening to this, is talk to your employer and make sure you guys are aware of when your status is going to expire. And what I mean by that, if you're on an F1 status, okay, and you graduate, right? Or even if you're here visiting the United States and you want to apply for the H-1B visa, be aware of when your status expires, because at the time of filing, you have to be in status, okay? And so you may have to do a change of status to make sure you cover yourself for that period of waiting, okay? But a good example here is if you're on OPT, and let's say your OPT expire on June 30th, okay? I'm just gonna give them a random date. If you file for H-1B May 15, okay, it will protect you because at the time of filing, you are still good, right? Then it will protect you to September 30th before October 1st, so you can start. So if you're on OPT and you know your status is about to run out, definitely you got to make sure you file for H-1B before your F1 expire. I'm sorry, before your OPT expire. And if you're not familiar with what OPT is optional practical training. It's usually you have up to 1 year after graduation. If you are in the STEM program, then it would be for 3 years. If for whatever reason you're not going to be able to keep up your status because you're not able to do change of status, then you do have to return back home and then wait until your visa is approved and then come back in. So it's very time sensitive to when you're doing, from you changing your status from a F1 OPT to an H-1B. So that's just something that I really want you guys to kind of keep in mind. And I can kind of briefly touch on some of this, but there are alternatives to H-1B, and I list all of them out right here. So let's just say for some reason H-1B may not be the best option for you. Be aware that a lot of countries have very specific visa available to them because of some treaty that they have with the United States. So Canadian and Mexicans, they have under the former NAFTA trade agreement, they could qualify for certain visa. It's TN visa. And TN visa is really popular with Mexicans and Canadians because I would say it's probably easier to get than the H-1B visa. And you could apply that at the port of entry or at the consulate. If you are from countries like Australia, Singapore, and Chile, you have specific visa that's available for you. So E3 is very similar to H-1B, but it is for specialty occupational workers from Australia. And then Singapore and Chile, you have those exception as well. E1 and E2 are really great visas for anyone, and I put example Toyota, for example. So for any treaty citizens that has 50% of business and share citizenship with employee. So Toyota is a great one, okay? So they actually have a lot of employees from Japan that are on E2 because 50% is here in the United States, okay? A good way to figure out if let's say I'm from Vietnam and I may go to my Chamber of Commerce, and say, hey, can you tell me a list of countries, I'm sorry, can you tell me a list of companies here in the area that have 50% of business and share citizenship with employee, and do they have any job offers? So that's something that you guys may want to consider. L1 managers is also really great way. If you, let's say you are either working as a manager, as executive, and you're willing to go to, you go into Canada and you work at that particular location for a year, and then you can come to United States. It's basically for somebody who had the inner working knowledge of that company, and they basically able to go back and forth between the different corporations or different divisions, sorry. So that's a great one for L1. O1, this is great for anyone in the STEM program, is Alien of Extraordinary Ability. J1 is a cultural exchange programs. And then finally, I know that you guys will probably have a lot of questions about F1 OPT, which I mentioned previously, is that after you graduate, you could have a year to work in that particular field, okay? And I put here the link to the USCIS website right here. Let me see if I could share. Are you able to see this optional project or training? Okay,
yes,
perfect.
we can see it.
Yeah, so there is no better way to kind of learn about this than on the USCIS website directly. It's pretty clear about how you can apply for OPT, okay? There's one that you could do it before you graduate, and then there's one that you could do it after you graduate. So I just put here as the link. If you guys have any more questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But if you are graduating in May and maybe you don't have a job offer, just yet, definitely consider this as an alternative to ways that you could extend, learn or staying here in the United States to work. You do have to work a minimum of 20 hours. STEM OPT has kind of like an advantage, so definitely look into this. And I think that should be everything I have regarding work visa sponsorship. And so I hope, do you want to just wait to the end to answer questions?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to make students aware that we popped that email address for USCIS into the comments section. And I know you asked about the nature of the students maybe joining us today or the chat. I wanted to throw in case it helps guide discussion, that a lot of the students that we see in the Career Development Center are graduate level students, typically College of Engineering, computer science students. I'd say that's the largest number, or at least that's the characteristic of a lot of the students we see.
Yeah, no, that's great. And we definitely have seen, just by us being so close to UTA, we have had a lot of clients who come from UTA with an OPT or like on H-1B. So I think, most people are very familiar with it, with what it is, but just actually going through the process is why we're here to assist people. But I also want to kind of flag it for a lot of people who come in, thinking like, hey, I want to, do a work visa. And just either talking to me or Denise, we're actually thinking there's a better option for you, okay? That's going to be able to get you your legal permanent resident a lot quicker, a lot easier, and maybe even, less cost-wise, okay? So I'm going to pass over to Denise, and she's going to talk about other types of immigration relief for students.
Hi, yes. So there are, like Carrie mentioned, other ways to obtain your green card, or sometimes the employment visa route just isn't an option for people. And so these are other options. This is not wholly inclusive of all the options. These are just the most common options that we see. And so if you ever find yourself in a position to where you're not able to get an employment visa, or your employment visa doesn't lead to a green card or permanent residency here in the US, these are some other ways that you might be able to obtain that. So the first is adjustment of status. And so this would be adjustment of status through a family-based petition. And so essentially, if you have what is a US citizen or legal permanent resident parent, spouse, child, there are different categories, and I won't get into the weeds of it because it involves different timelines on processing and where you're going to process, whether it's here in the US or whether it's in a consulate abroad. But if you have these existing relationships with people who have status here in the US, it is possible for you to obtain permanent residency that way. And so, like I mentioned, it's going to be very specific on the process based on whether you're in status at the time of applying, whether you entered with status. It's very, very case specific, but that is an option that if you do have a family member, if you're in that dating, if you're in that phase of your dating relationship where marriage might be the next step and that partner is a US citizen or a resident, it might be something worth exploring. The other visa type, there are visas available for victims of crimes. Unfortunately, all too common, especially people who immigrate from other countries are a more vulnerable population at times. And so Congress did carve out this exception or this visa type for situations where people may find themselves either the victim of a crime, and this is not an all-inclusive list, but the crimes under the U visa tab or bullet point are some of the common ones that we see, but there's an inclusive list on the USCIS website. But blackmail, domestic violence, sexual assault, felonious assault, extortion, these are the types of crimes that if you are the victim of, you definitely want to make sure you make a police report and that you collaborate or provide any sort of assistance or support the police may request. A lot of the times it doesn't go beyond just making a police report. But for example, in a domestic violence situation, you know that you don't withdraw the charges or tell, the prosecutor at the prosecution stage that you want to withdraw any sort of charge. Apart from that, it usually is just making the report and showing up when you need to show up, right? The bad thing about the U visa, it is also capped to the amount that they can issue yearly. And so what has happened is there's a large backlog. And so it's a process that while eventually you will get the green card, it is like a 10-year process, 10 to 15 year at this point. The wait time keeps growing because the cap hasn't grown, but the number of applicants has grown. And so what that means is you might be waiting for a while. Now, there is a work permit that is available for the duration of the application, but you aren't able to travel, and so that is a big issue for a lot of people that you are stuck in the country during the duration of that. Now, there's also T visa, and that is for victims of trafficking. Sex trafficking, we all know what that is, but labor trafficking is a lot more nuanced. And actually, a lot of the times people who come in on employment-based visas may be subject to labor trafficking. If you're not being paid overtime, you're not being paid the agreed amount that you were supposed to be paid by your employer, you're facing some abusive practices or abuse at the hands of your employer, you might be being labor trafficked. And so you do not have to put up with that. if there's this other option available to you, right? There's no need to put up with that abuse in order to obtain your green card. If you feel like you're in a situation where you might be being exploited at work and abused in a sense, you might want to talk to an immigration attorney to see if you qualify for this T visa, this visa for victims of trafficking. There's also something called VAWA. VAWA has been popularized lately. It used to be really a pretty unknown form of relief that really only nonprofits worked on, but it has gotten popular lately, so you might have heard of it. But basically, if you are the victim of abuse, it can be at the hands of your U.S. citizen spouse, a former spouse, a citizen parent, a citizen child, or a lawful permanent resident spouse or parent. You might also be eligible for this VAWA visa type, which does lead to a green card. The processing time on the VAWA and the T visa are much faster than the U visa. You're looking at about a 2 to 3 year wait period, and that's all done within the United States. For the VAWA, you have to prove that you were the victim of extreme cruelty and battery. It's battery or extreme cruelty. So it can be physical abuse, but it can also be emotional abuse. Another thing, right? If you are in a situation that you are with a person with status and they are abusive, there's no need to remain in that relationship, right? Solely because they might hold over their status over you as an immigrant. Because Congress has created this other form of relief to where you can obtain your green card, your residency, just by showing, and usually, people don't have tons of photos but an affidavit and the evidence you can gather, that's generally what's needed to obtain something like this. Finally, there is also, if you see your country on this list, there is something called temporary protected status. It is, like the name says, temporary. So this does not lead to a green card. This is just something that is, there's a list on the USCIS website that lists all the countries. And every country has a very specific requirement for how you qualify for something for the temporary protected status. A lot of this is due to strife or natural disasters that occurred in these countries. So for example, El Salvador, not every person that comes from El Salvador is eligible for temporary protected status. This is people who arrived in like the 90s, 2000s due to the civil war that was going on in El Salvador. Those are the people that have this temporary protective status and have been on it for like 20 something years at this point. Haiti had the earthquake. Honduras, not every person that gets here from Honduras qualifies. It's people that arrived after Hurricane Mitch, which was disastrous for the country. Ukraine, obviously, we all know what's going on in Ukraine. There's very recent designations with Ukraine and Venezuela. And so those, we might have some people on the call at this moment who would qualify to register for this temporary protected status. And so if you see your country on the list, you do want to go and look at the criteria and see if it's something that you might qualify for. But something to note is that, it is kind of at the whim, in a sense, of the executive branch, because temporary protective status can be, since it's not permanent, it's up to being designated every 2 years. And so your country has to appear on the list in order for you to apply for it again. And so if the government decides that it's no longer, that country the citizens of that country no longer require this status, and they no longer designate it as a country for TPS, then you're kind of out of luck. So it's kind of a last end resort for a lot of people that don't have a way to actually obtain a green card, but do need to be here for whatever the reason may be. And so that's all I had. Like I mentioned, that is not inclusive. If you notice, we did not touch on asylum. We did not touch on, there's other visa types, but these are just the most common and that we wanted to make sure that people were aware of.
Yeah,
But they,
and I was just gonna say, one thing about a lot of the visa that, or the processes that Denise mentioned, they do get a work permit as well. So that's something to consider too. If you, hey, I know that, it's hard right now, especially in the IT, right? Like the employers are not offering as many job offers as before. So maybe TPS, because you get a work permit, even if you're applying through adjustment of status to your spouse, you get a work permit as quickly as sometimes 3 to 6 months. So I always tell people, if you are considering like, hey, how do I need to stay here and work legally in the United States? Talk to an immigration attorney, because we're going to be able to tell you, hey, work visa is a great option. Hey, maybe not. Based on this, your specific facts, maybe we need to consider other options as well. So it's worth talking to an immigration attorney and seeing what your options are.
Thank you. Before I open it up to students, and if you have a question, please feel free to go ahead and turn on your camera and unmute your mic. We do want you to have an opportunity to meet folks and be seen on camera if you're willing to do that. But while we're waiting for folks potentially to join us, I know obviously your expertise are the legal issues concerning this process, but I know a lot of students probably have that question. And I know you have expertise in this area too. With the job search process itself and the frustration of maybe not being able to find an employer who will sponsor. And, I'm oftentimes encouraging persistence, right? On some level, it's a numbers game, just keeping a positive attitude and networking, those kinds of things. But are there other tips or thoughts you might have to help students with that frustrating search process, or any recommendations?
Yeah, I would say right now, especially with the economy not being the best, situation. I mean, I graduated in 2009 at the deep of the recession, so I know what it's like, how scary it is. And not necessarily encourage anyone to get into debt, but you see how an advanced degree does benefit. So if you are in a bachelor degree right now, considering getting that advanced degree, right? Because it's going to help you on the H-1B process. And just from like, I'm an employer, right? Just from a perspective from the employer, is that, work experience and advanced degree does mean something. So, maybe right now, not the best job market, but you also want to get an MBA, you want to pursue something further, or maybe you want to, switch it to another degree or something like that. That is an option. So I would encourage you to kind of pursue that. And then internship, I know that I can say that even if it's, I know if you are on F1, you can't work legally in the United States, but you can intern, right? So that is how you're going to be able to stand out among other resumes. That's what I look at when I'm an employer, is what kind of internship, unpaid, paid, or whatever it is. It's like, what efforts have that applicant done to make sure that they've gained the knowledge, the experience. So try to pursue any internship as possible that you can to kind of make you stand out from other candidates.
Yeah, and while we're waiting, usually we have students are a little bit shy, it seems, to want to jump on camera while we're waiting for hands to go up or for cameras to come on. I was just curious if you might be able to share any I mean, obviously this is a legal process. It's high stakes. It makes students nervous. It makes us nervous. I mean, honestly, you don't want to give a student bad advice. We always very quick to send students back to the Office of International Education for questions or seek out advice, obviously from experts like yourselves, because it is so high stakes. But are there any big do's and don'ts, common mistakes that students make, or any advice you might give them for navigating any common mistakes or pitfalls that you see?
Yeah, that's an excellent questions. And like I mentioned earlier, I get a lot of UTA students coming in before. And so I see there is the pattern where, and this is more for like F1 international students, sometimes they fell out status and they don't even know it. Okay. And that's where it gets tricky, is because when I'm doing, we're trying to do the work visa, or we're trying to do some other process. And I'm like, hey, what's your status? They're like, I'm on F1. Well, no, you're not, because you have fallen out status. So whenever a international student transfer from one institution to another, it's under the CVIS system, which we don't have any control over. The government does. And so they just have to make sure that their paperwork is done correctly, and it's very technical. So that's my biggest advice to international students, is be very aware, check in to make sure that all the paperwork is done, go to the international student department, just making sure, like, maybe they drop a few hours, maybe they need to register on time. Those are the things, because I have had quite a few UTA students that fell out of status and they weren't even aware of that.
And it sounded like those were a couple common things that you see that happen to students when they fall out of status. Is it's an hourly requirement, or are there some other things that you typically see that causes that to happen that we could share?
And then, like, a lot of people transfer, maybe from a community college into a UTA, and they're supposed to notify immigration, and there's a certain specific deadline and paper that has to be done by the institution. And so, sometimes the student advisor who's doing it may not be aware, and the student is assuming everything is done correctly. So when I'm working with an F1 international student, that's probably the most common thing that I've seen, is the status issues.
Excellent. We do have a student question. I see a hand up, and I'm going to welcome her to turn on her camera if she likes. If not, you're not in that place. I understand, right? If you want to turn on your mic, please, and ask your question.
Sure. Hi. I joined in a little bit late, but you had mentioned something about so I'm graduating in May, hopefully, but you had talked about, was it starting to look at the process for applying for like OPT or CPT? Are you able to repeat that for me one more time, please?
Yeah, and I think in the chat, there should be a link to the optional practical training OPT students on USCIS. Let me see. Yeah. Sure. Okay, let me share that. This is the information that I would highly encourage you to start with, okay? That talks about the different types of OPT, depending on where you are in your education. If you're graduating, or if you're about to graduate very soon, you may want to look at this. But you are eligible for to apply for an OPT program, okay? Again, you have to, the program has to be available for you, and there's paperwork, and obviously, but you have to, you can extend it for 1 year and up to 3 years if you're under the STEM program. So that's generally the guideline. I would highly encourage you. There's a lot more information within this, I guess, this link that will be able to they can tell you when to apply, depending on your degree right here as well. So I highly encourage you to look at that.
Thank you so much. That makes sense. Thank you.
Of course. And if you have any questions or anything that you're unclear about, I do want to make it, I see there's 8 people, so I'm going to have Denise create a fun code for the live participants. If you guys have either questions for me or for Denise, either now or in the future, you can call office. I think we should have our office phone number, but if not, is 817-330-9734. And if you ask to have a consultation with one of us, make sure you give them a code, and that will be a fun little gift from us to you guys for a free consultation. So do you want to share the code?
Yeah. Let's do Go Mavs. GOMAVS. Go Mavs. And our very, very friendly intake personnel, we'll let them know about it after this meeting. So if they'll answer, just let them know. They will try to charge you, so just let them know. No, Go Mavs.
Well, and just to make sure that we keep everyone honest, because this is being recorded, and we could have hundreds and hundreds of people viewing it. I'll also check our registration list and see who is with us today officially, so we can kind of check those names, because we do appreciate those students taking the time. I know it's a busy time of year. I think I've seen a lot of students working with exams and trying to kind of squeeze things in. So we appreciate you taking the time to be with us, and thank you all so much, for your time and expertise. Yeah, like I said, I've been really excited to have this conversation and offer this information to students, and so very kind of you to offer that consultation opportunity. That's a valuable opportunity. So students, please take advantage of that. And before we wrap things up, I know we're right at time. Are there any reminders or anything that you all would like to share before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I mean, if you are doing the H-1B, this is the time, right? March 1st is when the registration opened up. So like I say, if you have an employee in mind and that discussion has already been started, definitely you need to do it, okay? And then I also wanted to encourage, if anyone here is interested in either going to law school or just wanted to see what it is like to be a lawyer, Denise and we have met with women in law at UTA. We are glad to talk to anyone that was like, I want to know what courses I should take. Do I need to take a year off after I graduate to go to law school? We have had many of those discussions before with undergrad students. So we are here to support UTA and all the wonderful things that you guys do. So if you know of anyone that wanted to, touch base with us, Denise and I are glad to. We're busy, but we will definitely make time for UTA students.
Thank you.
And remember, employment-based is not the end-all be-all.
Right. And that's a great reminder, because that's what we have in our minds in the Career Development Center, right? I mean, we're all thinking about employment and that route. So it was great to see those options provided. I learned a lot, and I can certainly see why it's helpful to have an attorney take you through some of this. It is complicated, and I think sometimes we also, or my thought is, not having the experience of working with a lot of international students before coming to UTA, is they already know a lot of this stuff, and why would they? Just because they've come to the United States to study doesn't know they would mean know the ins and outs of, U.S. law regarding immigration. I mean, it's complicated. So thank you again for your time. And again, look for our guests' internships on Handshake. Visit the chat to connect. We do have LinkedIn information there, website, a direct link to the website there as well. I know that there was an email address, admin, I think, at CaryLegal.com to share resumes. I mean, we've so much you're offering to students. We appreciate it. And if you, we've already talked about the consultation. Great. So thank you again both for sharing your expertise with us and for offering opportunities to UTA students. And we hope to see everyone again soon.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Julie and David. You guys it's been an honor working with you, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.